Welcome to the Startups and AI podcast. Today, I have Lola from Lunch Pail Labs. Thank you for joining, Lola. Would love to hear what you've been building at Lunch Pail Labs and, talk me through your journey into entrepreneurship.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. Really, always excited to jam about entrepreneurship and AI with other folks. But yeah, so I run Lunch Pail Labs. It is a software studio based out of Atlanta, and through Lunch Pail Labs, manage a portfolio of tiny B2B tools. And so historically, we've been really focused on integrations and different integrations for platforms. And recently have been really focused on tiny ops skills and tools for other agents. So yeah, that's like Lunch Pail Labs in a nutshell. I've been running this for just past 6 official years, and so it's been a fun continuous journey, and yeah, really
Awesome.
really
Awesome.
love the
Yeah, would
product
love to
studio
hear.
approach. Yeah.
Yeah, would love to hear maybe a couple of use cases that have stayed with you during these 6 years, like your favorite projects that you were able to help customers with.
Ooh, that's a really great question. Of yeah, like some of my favorite. I think so. Use cases have definitely changed over the years. Some things that I've really enjoyed are that I think are still underrated, even though AI is changing the landscape a bit. Are like marketplace integrations and marketplace tools. I think whether you have like a SaaS company or you're like an indie entrepreneur looking to build on a marketplace or build a tool, building on top of an existing marketplace is always like an interesting and fun strategy where you get to focus a little bit more like less on the actual like use cases, and because they're so like proven and there's so much more information when you're building for a marketplace on like what users need, and like they're literally telling you about problems on forums, you get to spend a lot more time just like on the fun like build part and like teaching part and like customer interaction pieces. So one that I've really enjoyed is like a video plugin that we manage specifically for Bubble. And it's like such like a small tool, but or like very simple use case. It's just for like adding like video functionality to like a Bubble app. But that's been a really fun one to grow and manage over the years.
Awesome. Yeah, and with AI, videos are changing so much. Have you played around with some of the new AI models that generate video content? And in general, would love to hear, you started 6 years ago before this chat GPT came in, right? And how have things changed? And what's your go-to stack now with AI?
Ooh, yes. All great questions. So I'll tackle like the video side. I've done some experimenting with video and AI, in particular, the like using it in my like for video production. Because one really fun thing over the years is like a lot of our users just come from video content and tutorials for those integrations, which I think YouTube, especially for B2B, not so many like developer tools and SaaS tools like manage YouTube channels, but videos tend to rank really quickly. And especially if you're like creating content on a very like niche keyword, it doesn't take a lot of views or comments for that to be like the video that appears for like a very like niche keyword. So I have experimented with tools like Remotion and hyperframes, which are more so for like the composition of video. I haven't yet used like my AI avatar to create those videos. I think they're still a little bit like uncanny valley, but the models, especially like the personal avatars that I've seen, I think hyperframes, HeyGen does that really well, are quite interesting. But for like business use cases, I'm still like on the fence on like, how useful like the avatars are for like video gen. How about
Yeah.
yourself? Like, have you used much of the video tools for like actually creating of videos? I did try one and it ended up being like, if I was doing like a cartoon, I think it would have been like more interesting, but like for like a tutorial, it was kind of a little bit distracting with like the character keeps changing, but could be a skill
Yeah,
issue.
yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One, how fast the models keep upgrading. So maybe like 6 months ago, it was definitely not up to the mark. I tried generating that one of those avatar videos by didn't really look human. It like just seemed weird. You can't connect with it, just like, how we are talking in person, like person to person in a way. But like recently I've been seeing some almost like ads which are avatar generated, and they're getting pretty close to almost like, I think, in a way that some people might not be able to tell the difference anymore. So yeah, it's definitely pretty interesting space. And then videos could be, like you said, it could be for so many different things, like, generating like cartoons or, animations, movies, that kind of stuff. But like for training, it's a different use case. And yeah, so it's definitely something I'll be trying out soon as the models improve. What about like some other tools that you're like, video is one, like how have, the process of you solving problems changed with like AI? You started 6 years ago, and now like how do you work now
Mhm.
versus before?
Ooh, that's another really great question. I think the biggest thing for me has absolutely been speed, like just like the output and the amount of like ideas that I can test simultaneously, for better or for worse, has like absolutely expanded. I use open code as my main like daily driver. And even for like kind of going back to your earlier question about like AI stacks, I kind of have like a split setup where using AI locally to do work, kind of like synchronous work, and that's mostly with open code. And then I have a Slack agent called Pippa that's homegrown that does more like autonomous tasks. So things that are like routine, going in, picking up the next latest issue from Linear, doing that, and that's also using open code as like the agent harness and the agent brain. But it's funny because for these 6 years, like Lunch Pail Labs has primarily been like a solo studio. So I feel like now I'm finally in the moment where like I've got all of the superpowers to really accelerate that. And then in a lot of the work that I do, and I think, yeah, I'd be curious if you've experienced this as well. Like anything that I used to do that was more like individual contribution, like being in the code and coding, it's like everything has kind of been like promoted up a level. And so, like, the questions that I have to sort of sit with in the work are less about like how do we do this one thing this one time, and more of like, how do you design this system of robots that can do this one thing one time, which is, or more than one time, which is also like a fun question to like get to steer the system more.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't probably feel like a solo person anymore. Like you really have, literally, you have your colleagues now that you talk to, and they do like different things. I've been mostly using Cursor because then I can switch between like Claude or GPT or even like their own composer model for like basic things. And then like I think loops is the new thing, where first like you were generating all these basically prompts, and you were, giving different tasks to different agents. But now it's all about like, how do you create a system that just keeps doing things in a loop by themselves, like fully autonomously?
Hmm.
So would love to hear about like, do you have some of those like fully autonomous things, or do you still do like mostly human in the loop, like, and how it's evolving?
Ooh, yeah. Those are like such great questions. Yeah, especially the loops I've found to be really interesting. And like I feel like it got like a different name. Like a couple months ago, it was like everybody was talking about Ralph Wiggum. And it's like now I guess Ralph Wiggum is loops. But I use them in a couple of different ways. I don't use them as much locally, but like with my agent in Slack, there are sort of like three ways that work kicks off autonomously. And so one is just like on a schedule. So like regardless of me being there, goes, does the thing. I'm a really big fan of compound engineering. It's like a plugin by Every, and they just have really dialed in like a really nice full service like engineering flow, from taking like a general idea to from like a plan all the way to submitting the PR and like reviewing the plan. And so I'll use the compound engineering plugin, and while they have it in step by step mode, they have like this hidden they call it like the let's, I think it's like LFG, so like let's up and go mode, where you just like straight shot, you give it like a well-defined issue, and then it can do that. And so one lane of my flows is I'll have just like a ton of issues, and then on like a heartbeat, my agent's just picking that up, submitting the issue. I still have review. So like I think like the at least for me, that like review to live across all types of work, not even just whether it's like a blog post or it is a pull request or some code. There's still that bit where I'm in the loop, but the kicking it off and at least getting the work out for me to review is pretty autonomous. So I've got the schedule and then I have things that are on triggers. So like for a support request, for example, easy, like I feel like just like a general flow where it's like, okay, if I get a new support request, it first kicks off to the agent. The agent, if it's easy, agent answers it. If it's not easy, then, agent lets me know. And then, yeah, I think really it's like those two, like things that just run on the schedule and then things that respond to external triggers. So kind of
Yeah.
loops, but not so much of like, let me define this meta goal and have the loop run the loop. Curious if
Yeah.
like how you use loops in practice. I feel like I see so much content about it, but like
Yeah,
I like
I'm
haven't.
Yeah, I'm also still trying to figure out, like, basically, I have one where it just runs every day to check for bugs in specific places because, like, I'm doing like new PRs every day. And, like, even though I review, I just have like one loop to double review in a way. It just keeps running and it just keeps finding and then it'll just push a PR. So it's just one kind of loop that does things every day. And then there could be thinking about things for like content generation, haven't like exactly figured it out, but yeah, the thing is, like, I think you also brought it up, is it's not great at everything, so you need that human in the loop so far. So, like, curious to know what things you find it doing like really well, and like what tasks you think it still needs like more human in the loop right now. Like, for example, coding, I think if you use the best model, it's probably almost doing it pretty well, but like maybe content creation still needs that taste. But like, what's your thoughts
Ooh,
there?
on that. Oh yeah. Oh, that's a really, really great question. Yeah, I think for me, like the difference are like things that are more fun, either will end up being a little bit more like customer facing or have like some creativity. Like even with the coding, I think it's fine. Really like I've found some of the, I won't even call it like magic. It just like depends on how much of the intent of like the goal of the issue that I put in the issue to start with. That kind of like affects like at the end of it, whether I have to kind of like be like, okay, we just totally did something different. But then it's like my fault. Kind of like if you're like on a team, right? And you're like a manager, like if you gave really vague instructions, like, is it your fault that your team didn't know how to execute those instructions? What I find it to be super good at, and some of my like favorite use cases are just like very little ops use cases, because especially for some of like the client slash studio work I do, and that's more custom and bespoke, there's just so many little things like, oh, did XYZ follow up on this? Oh, you've got like a comment on this. Like, let's organize the comments. Like, all of that. I think it's just really great at those like small operational tasks. I think it's depending on the model. I use a lot of open source models. I try to, as much as possible, like experiment with like open source and local AI. But so yeah, I'd say ops, like internal, like back office, like ops things where it's like as long as you kind of do it, it's fine. And there's not a lot of art to it. Meeting notes, summarizing, like,
Hmm.
keeping track on like what projects are on track or not on track, who needs a follow up, who needs to be bumped on, works really well. And then the more creative, like coding, I would probably like put that in the middle for me. Just really depends on how much like initial context I've given.
Context.
One thing I do like about the compound engineering plugin is they have this like feature, and it's like a free plugin that at the end you can ask for like a screen share and like a screen review. So you can just like have like a visual PR review of like, especially when you're creating like more front end elements of like, hey, it's not done
Mm,
until you like successfully show me a video of it being done. And that kind of helps bridge the gap between like product intent and like what the agent does. And then the last one is on the more like very creative stuff. Like I do make videos, like video production. I think for me, I find it less like you still need a lot of like tuning, not even so much tuning, but you have to do the upfront work to like set content and tuning. Cause I think, especially for writing as well, just because it has such an obvious smell, like people know when they read like AI generated slop. If they read an AI generated meeting note, I don't think people like really care that much. But if it's like, this is like blog post and it just feels like AI slop, or if you have even just like design or like video and it like feels like you're reading an AI ad, I think those have very obvious tells. So, which defeat the purpose of creating the content anyway. So I think those I've
Yeah.
found, I haven't found a workflow to just like scale my own, like, this is how I write really well, or like, this is how
Mm.
make it match my voice and just me for like those more creative pursuits. But yeah, I'd say small operational tasks knocks it out of the park. I love using that. Sort my inbox type things. Like, yeah, do that all day. And then
Yeah.
like, yeah, coding depending on the PR in the middle. How about you?
Yeah.
Like what are the
Yeah, yeah, I like totally agree. I think like for coding, if you give enough context and then like, you prepare all the documents, all the requirements pretty well per feature, and like initially you need to do a lot of brainstorming, right? Like, but like once you've got the basics correct, like the application's working, then I think like just building on top, fixing bugs, adding like a few things here and there, it does like pretty well because it has like all that context. Versus like when you're starting off in the beginning, it's more like, again, like that probably belongs in the creative domain, like when you're starting off from like blank slate. But then eventually, like you said, like anything to summarize or like basically text based, it's like got really good at. And in the end, like code is also kind of just text versus like, a video is like very complicated, very complex problem to solve. And again, like AI slop, all those, blog posts and LinkedIn outreach, which like like a person didn't write it, like, and it's kind of like creating a bad experience overall on like LinkedIn, X, wherever. So those are definitely, I think, things that need a lot of work. And yeah, I don't know, maybe, but you brought a very interesting point about using open source. And you've probably been following how the US government is now taking control of GPT 5.6 or Mythos
Mhm.
Mythos 5. What do you think is the future going to be like? And I know like GLM 5.2, there's like all those open source models, which in terms of benchmarks are getting pretty close to, let's say, Opus 4.7 level or GPT 5.3. And then like at what time the cost benefit is just not enough to continue with, OpenAI or Claude? Like, I'd love to hear your thoughts on like, what's the future? Is it open source or?
Or like, yeah, closed source. That's
uh,
such a great question. I mean, I am an open source fangirly for sure. Local AI fangirly. But yeah, I think there's some really interesting headwinds that are going to accelerate some trends. Like one, now the cat's out of the bag. I think in terms of frontier models, we can probably assume that we will not have equal access to those frontier models. I mean, just like the cost, I think there's been so many interesting profiles, like the Uber example of like, oh, they like use Frontier and they blew their whole budget of like 500 million in like 4 months. And even like the case studies of different companies who are now moving I think Lindy, even just yesterday was like, they're using DeepSeek now instead of either OpenAI and Anthropic, and it's going to save them millions of dollars. And so just like on the cost, cost perspective, I think we'll see a lot more people using open source. And especially it's been interesting because I've been, using AI for a while. I really think we're getting on a curve of like diminishing returns of like intelligence. Like GPT-3 is like, wow, like you can create text and it's good. And then like GPT-4 was like a really big thing. I've used GPT 5.5, 5.3, 5.2. Like they're starting to feel like less magical leaps in like raw intelligence. So while open source tends to be a little bit more behind the frontier models, I think it's going to end up mattering a lot less, which will accelerate because it's like if it's just a little less smart and 100 times cheaper, I
Mhm.
mean, just like the cost benefit analysis there. So those things. I'm also really interested in local AI. So I think some of Apple's latest launches, even though there are I know like there's a big like memory shortage with Apple and their hardware is getting more
RAM.
expensive, but I don't think we're too far. Like it's plausible in the future our computers will likely be powerful enough to run very capable models that can do all of our AI for us. And then, I mean, that's not going to be owned. We're not going to be paying a subscription to like OpenAI and like Anthropic for that unless if they're making the computers. So I think that's going to be helpful. So yeah, I think couple of things. One, the intelligence to me doesn't feel like it's making that massive leaps where it makes a big impact on like the coding PR that I'm making or like the email that I'm sending. Open source is going to start catching up to that even more. And I think our machines, it's going to be easier, hopefully in the future, to actually like run some of these bigger models locally or for very cheap, which is also going to help. So yeah, that's my 3 point.
Yeah,
How about you? Like,
yeah.
are you? I also know. Are you going?
No, just you said I also know. Complete that and then
And I mean, I also know that there's like the flip argument because, one thing sometimes when you deal with like a less capable model, even if it feels like the intelligence is not that great, like you sometimes end up, depending on the task, you sometimes end up spending more tokens because you have to do like more refining versus, the super models that can one shot it. But I didn't even get a chance to experience Fable before they locked it down. So I don't know. I have not yet experienced I think a lot of people had
yeah.
really great things to say about how it's like a really different model, but so far in my experience, it's just been slightly better, but not crazy
Yeah, I
difference to
mean,
my workflow.
yeah, I'll say like a couple of things. One on like having local models. I think there's like a lot of research I'm seeing in small language models, which probably is going to come with cell phones where like they're trying to like with much less requirement for hardware and it's going to be a bit less smart, but it's going to be like good enough for let's say like 75% of things, then it's good to have on every phone like locally. So I'm definitely, I think that's going to be there in every hardware. There's going to be small language models if not large language models, because there's also like a global, I think, shortage of RAM right now. And I think
Mhm.
like all the big companies and data centers are just taking all that and also taking all the GPUs. So maybe like small language models is going to be an answer there. And then in terms of models getting smarter, I feel like there are from time to time, I'm seeing a big shift in the intelligence. So like initially, the first time I saw like a very big shift was Opus 4.5, where like
Mm.
it was able to do in terms of I think long running tasks where you give it a task it can work for an hour. And also there's like nuances, right? Like there's you use it in low setting, extra high, medium, like there's all those things that maybe not everyone's using, because like the
Mhm.
more compute runtime compute is also one of the factors and like the quality. So I think like that also helps. But yeah, I thought like after 4.5 I didn't see as much improvement, but then I was able to use Fable for a couple of days before they shut it down. And again, at least I felt that it was a similar kind of jump in improvement, how I saw with Opus 4.5 compared to like the previous models, where maybe like, we were talking about the current models have this shortcoming in terms of when it's writing, it feels like AI slop. So I feel like if these new models can solve that kind of problems, where you could just like completely sit back and it can do like almost at a human level some of those things, then I think there's definitely people would pay like a premium for those. But then again, on the flip side,
Mhm.
the open source models are probably only 6 months behind that. So the cost, would it justify it for everyone? So these are like interesting things to look forward to. What do you think the world's gonna look like? Like,
Yeah.
what do you think about jobs? What do you think about jobs? Like, are there
Mm-mm.
gonna be less jobs?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts there?
Ooh, I like tend to be like an optimist. I think there's going I mean, I think there are going to be some like shifts, but I think a couple of things will happen. Consumer expectations will rise. So like what we demand of software and the services that we use will be greater than what we kind of demand and expect today. Like even if you look 20 years ago, everybody loves to show like, oh, this was Google in like 20 years ago and it was like kind of like a crappy looking website. It's like you can't just like have like a crappy looking Google today. Like that's not going to fly. Like I think we'll have like even higher like expectations of what our like what software does, it achieves. And so the ceiling is going to keep going up, which will kind of counteract the ease in which today's intelligence can do like yesterday's work. And I also think there's probably going to be, I think there's going to be like just like other like roles and ways in which we work, which we may not be able to conceive with. There's this one article, I always forget like the author, but it just goes through some of the technological advancements that we've had. And we've always had this like the tech is going to take all the jobs. We said it like in the internet, the steam engine. And it's like, while it does take some jobs, it makes a lot of new different jobs. And so while Anthropic and a lot of the AI people sometimes have this like doom and gloom of it's all going to go away. You're not going to need everything. I think it's going to end up being a little bit more nuanced. Definitely some shifts, but I think we'll find other things to do. And I mean, already, like I just saw that Ford, I think it was yesterday, they fired a bunch of people because of AI, and they like rehired them because it's like they still needed to. And there's been so many of those such stories where like the like impact still is a little bit like overblown in some ways. And so all to say, I am optimistic. I think we'll like in 10 years, how we work might look totally different than how we work. Like made like to our 10 years in the future selves, like what we do might be like working in a factory and people will be like, oh wow, like did you know that they like sat on a computer all day and like we're like typing stuff, and that might be like very foreign. But I think we'll find like other things to do, and it's like a little bit overblown, the cases in which it's just going to be like permanent underclass and doom and gloom. So how about you? Are
Mm.
you like, do you think it's,
Uh,
especially like with some of your experiences and like big tech, like does it feel like it is the coming end of the world or?
yeah, I mean, like you said, there's like the bar is also going to keep rising, which I think is a very good point. Now, like maybe previously, if you didn't need a UX engineer because your work was fine to be a lower bar, now like you need to have, because you could do a lot with AI. So even to use AI, maybe you can use multiple agents, but you need at least one person to look after that. And then like the second thing, I think there's like infinite work that can be done. If you think
Mhm.
like society is going to move towards like, I don't know, like a Star Wars like future, there's going to be like billions of tasks and jobs that need to be done to take us there. Although I feel like if you think about, say, driving as a job, there's like tens of millions of people who like whose livelihood is driving. Like Tesla can
Mm.
do like fully autonomous, and there are like all these other AI companies trying to solve that problem. So would there be jobs needed for driving anymore in 5 years from now? Like those are definitely going to get displaced, I think. Things like that. And even like for
Mhm.
software, you probably don't need a team of like, 20,000 people for a software business anymore, right? Like all
Mm.
these big tech companies, yeah, they have tens of thousands. But at the same time, like on the flip side, there would be a lot more opportunities to create new startups, right? So, I mean, though all those people have to reshuffle, so there's going to be like chaos, I think, in between. Is
Yeah.
what I feel. But I don't know, like, what if AI gets like extremely better? Like, if it follows the exponential curve, then is there anything needed? Like, do you have to sit in front of the computer or you're just talking to it, it's doing things? Like, those things are something I can't comprehend. But
Yeah.
do you think there's like a
Yeah.
dystopian, like, what's the worst case you think in your head?
Mm.
Is there even
That's
though
such
you're an
like a great
optimist?
point. 'Cause it is like a little bit of like that dystopian. I mean, like, you hear about AGI, like if we had a super AI that could do all the things for you at any moment, like would that mean that nobody gets anything done? And, in today's reality, we have some constraints. Like sometimes it's, I think, and especially with like the memory and the shortage, which may not be the case forever, we're going to have to start having conversations whether it's actually like economically efficient to have like a super AI like spend a bunch of tokens to like spin up Salesforce or just to like use Salesforce. Like it's like you're going to
Mm,
have like some of those. So it's just I think it's like very like sci-fi to think of like, yeah, what it might look like if we did have
mm,
this super AI. But I think a couple of things will still remain. Like people will still want outcomes. And
mhm,
it might be simplistic, but like even if you look at today, there's a lot of things I pay for that I could presumably maybe do or spin up but I'm not going to because why would I want to spend my time? I think we'll still have that like comparative, not so much like advantage, but in business, in our daily lives, we'll still ask the question, even if I could, will I want to? And even if AI makes a lot of things trivial, I think we'll still say, I don't want to spend my time or the tokens, even if it's just the tokens. There's going to be some costs. I don't want to spend the cost doing this other thing when I could do this other thing. So, but it's I haven't seen AGI yet and I haven't experienced it. So, I could definitely be wrong with like in the face of like a supercomputer that could do everything. But I think we'll shift. Like there'll definitely be disruption. I absolutely agree with that. Like some jobs won't exist. Like, there's not typewriter people anymore, right? And that was a whole industry before, or like physical scribe folks. So things will shift, but I think we'll have a lot, probably more companies will be doing things. There's probably whole industries. I just found out that somebody's like building an insurance for AI agents. That's a whole other, we got cards for AI agents, therapists for AI agents. That's a whole other burgeoning industry of all sorts of different jobs that, in today's seat, we don't even understand why or how it works. But in the future, who knows?
Yeah,
Maybe most people
yeah,
are just AI therapists.
yeah, yeah. Maybe like I think not for the next 5 to 10 years at least, while we're still building stuff. And also, like people could go on the streets and just shut down the data centers if like there's like massive job losses. That's like another thing that could happen.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I think probably the way it's going to work is like everyone is going to try to minimize disruption, and like it might be like a combination of government working with like big tech and ensuring that you don't launch things too fast that there's like too much disruption. Maybe that's how it's going to be. Finally, would love to learn about what have been some of your best lessons or mistakes in your entrepreneurial journey that new founders can learn from.
Ooh, yeah, that's a really, really also so many great questions. I think for me, like the thing that like I keep coming back to is like know what kind of business you want to build and like what game you're playing. Because there's a lot of, especially when I like first started, there's like so much advice about how to run things, like how to build a niche or how to build your business. But like underneath it, like it really depends on like what kind of business that you want to build. So, for example, like if you hate sales and cold calling, like deciding to build a business that will require, I don't know, founder led sales and cold calling will make you probably a miserable person. And like, if you like hate creating content, deciding to build a business that needs to scale through like those distribution channels makes you might not make you a very happy person either. One letter that I really, really love, I think the name is like Joel Sponsky, but he's like some entrepreneur. And he has this letter called like Ben and Jerry's versus Amazon. And the whole point of like the article is like you need to know if you're trying to be a Ben and Jerry's versus an Amazon. Ben and Jerry's, there are many ice cream shops. Like, you can, differentiate on being an ice cream shop that stands for something. Amazon, there's like, are you in like this land grab? Are you trying to build like a land grab business where it's like really only a few winners in that market? And the ways you're going to build an Amazon are not the same as like building a Ben and Jerry's. And so if you like kind of blindly take the advice of like, oh, like you should do this and you should raise this and do that, and you're trying to build a Ben and Jerry's, it's like maybe you shouldn't take the Amazon playbook. So I think, yeah, like one, being very wary of like the advice that you take, and then also having that introspection of being really honest because it's a long game. Like building a business might be something that you're in for like the next 10 years, for the rest of your life. Like some of the fundamentals need to make sense for you as like the founder and like the leader of that venture to be something that you want to be excited to show up to every day. So,
Yeah,
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 I say like those here.
yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing is like you have to be willing to do that every day, and that's probably gonna be the biggest factor to your success. If you don't even want to show up, then there's no point for sure.
Hmm.
So it should be something you enjoy. Awesome. Well, thank you for all the great advice and talking about AI. It was a lot of fun. And all the best with Lunch Pail Labs. Yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, this was super fun. I always love jamming about AI. Yeah. I'll talk anybody's head off about AI any day. I love it. It's so fun. So, yeah, it was great.